Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Tim O'Reilly. I'm with Backyard ADUs, and with us tonight is Jeff Bowman, small home advisor in Maine. Between the two of us, we're covering Massachusetts, parts of New Hampshire, and Maine. So we have a pretty broad set of knowledge. We haven't built in every town yet, but we built in a lot. So all the information we'll go over tonight will hopefully apply to most, if not all, municipalities here in these regions. Of course, the asterisk there is every town is different. So we'll try to highlight some of those things tonight where, based on your specific circumstances, what might be some next steps to talk to your local officials to see, hey, how do we do it here?
Yep. Yep. Great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Tim. Thanks for kicking us off here. Our main goal, talking through a feasibility study, what that means for us, what that means for your property, answering your specific questions as you have them. But we have a pretty detailed webinar here planned for you. So we'll go ahead and let's go ahead and get this thing started here. Quick touch on who we are. We're based in Brunswick, Maine. There's our service regions. We're ever growing, which is fun. And we built a lot of ADUs last year and intend to build even more this year. Gotten into some other fun single family, multifamily, townhome, condo type things as well. But we're here to talk about ADUs and what's feasible on your property. Let's see, why is that not working? There you go. I'm already talking ahead of myself here.
I think I stole the thunder on this. Hey, what are we doing tonight? But yeah, absolutely. It's, hey, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of what we do. The underlying information, why, is what we really want to get at, because that will help everyone maybe look and identify what some next steps might be for their project. Excuse me. Yeah. We'll talk about our process and sort of why we do it. Not everyone does it this way, but we feel like there's some advantages to sort of the 3 steps we do. What ends up coming out of that, both the physical documentation, but also what questions get answered. That's sort of why we've structured our 3-step process. And then we'll really talk about, hey, how do you start this? These are, smaller houses, but still big, complicated projects. Every lot is different. Every town is different. Everyone builds this for, potentially a slightly different reason, certainly a different person. So our goal is really to figure out, all right, what might be some next steps? What might be some hurdles? Let's identify those, make a game plan, and then move forward from there.
Okay, look at this. I remember this. This was Pownell, Maine. How do we go from a yard to the ADU? So, feasibility studies. The feasibility study in general, so we have our own feasibility study, but you could take this and run with it on your own. Our feasibility study is trying to get, okay, what is the monster that I'm dealing with here? What is it that I'm trying to tackle here? Ours tries to get you the accurate information from a zoning perspective, what's permissible in your municipality, let alone in your state, in your residential zone district, any kind of overlays that you might have. There's a lot of things that can kind of restrict where you can put an ADU and what might constitute an ADU. And then we're also thinking about, who is this for, and helping design things that might be for an aging family member, for somebody that might have accessibility needs or not, or, with the other side of things. So we start to think about those ideas. Trying to provide some cost implications, zoning review. Our feasibility study does not have an expiration date, so I had one in December. Who I did a feasibility study in 2023. They came back and they said, "Hey, I think I want to go forward with an ADU project." I said, "Oh my gosh, it's so nice to see you." So we quickly updated the feasibility, the pricing, any kind of implications identified. They actually got a little bit more permissible in their municipality, which was cool to see. and now we're signing them up for design. So there's no expiration date on our feasibility study that we do internally.
I had someone similar, Jeff, in Massachusetts, and they came back. They came back basically 2 years later, and in Massachusetts, hey, with the Affordable Homes Act, all of the rules had changed in their town, and we did the same thing. We said, great, let's pull it up. We were on site, we documented it. We'll update this, get you, how have things changed in 2 years, and they may end up in a similar boat, which has been great.
Cool. Cool. All right. Breaking down the cost of a small home. So there is, with these smaller homes, there are less square feet. So every square foot counts. That really comes in, gets hit home during design process. How are we designing this home? How do we maximize the square footage? But generally speaking, we're still, even though it's a smaller, typical ADUs or smaller homes, you still have a lot of built-in costs that are similar to or the same as if you were building a large single-family home. I'm thinking of any kind of permitting fees. Those are going to typically be pretty apples to apples. A lot of things like utility connections, we're able to get some savings, some cost savings with utility connections if we're able to utilize the existing infrastructure for the ADU, meaning if we're able to tie in off of the water line or the sewer line, rather than make a brand new connection. But there's still going to be costs to mobilize the workforce out there. Foundation costs are similar in that regard. You still got to get the foundation crew out there. So there are some costs that start to add up, even though we're building a smaller home that would be applicable to a larger home.
And to sort of draw a line in the sand, like, hey, how much of this can we know ahead of time before we do a feasibility? And what do we actually get from the feasibility? The crux really comes into, hey, foundation utility connections, what might be some site prep from the computer, from our pricing guide, which we'll talk about a bit later. We're pretty dialed in on what's the cost of the house. What is, above the foundation. There'll obviously be choices on countertops and floors and all that. But what are the specific things on your site that are going to impact cost? And this is often the items that we're trying to get ahead of and sort of pull to the surface to highlight at the feasibility level to say, on your lot with your utilities, this is going to be the budget. We have placeholders for these all on the site in the pricing guide. And working, how do we promote more housing is we need apples to apples comparison. So our goal, both with the pricing guide and the feasibility, is let's dial these in. The pricing guide is general. The feasibility gets us closer because we've had our eyes on these things to help people really figure out what is it going to cost for their project.
Yeah, that's good. Good thing to highlight there. So thinking about like foundation, the feasibility study I did today, they want to do a full walkout basement because he's on a big hill, which makes sense. That is going to be different than what our typical foundation system is. That would be priced out in the pricing guide. So in his feasibility study, I'm going to highlight, hey, you want to do a full walkout basement. Here's that extra cost associated with what your desire is. So
the one I did today was we're going to have to cut down some trees and we're going to have to add a new driveway. So those are site prep items that we need to highlight to say, hey, this is really what it will be.
Yeah. Every lot's different. So, okay. Before the site visit, we're talking with you. We're meeting with you. We're figuring out what it is that your vision is, what your goal, all of these things. It's good to make sure that we're aligned in what it is that you're attempting to do and what your timeline is and what our timeline is and those things. We will do some high level reviewing of your property. So we'll pull up, and I want to make sure we're not spending too much time on throughout this. We can actually do the live feasibility study.
Yeah. We're going to do it live with all of these things.
Yes, exactly. So we'll do that. So I'll kind of be real quick here, but we'll pull up a GIS. We'll look at somebody's property. We'll make sure that that there is room, that the town allows for it. All of these towns have gotten much more permissible as we move forward, so that's nice to see.
I have two
Uh,
questions for you, Jeff, on that
Lay 'em
slide.
on me. Lay 'em on me.
Uh, Someone asked, they've asked four different questions, but I'm going to hit you with two of them now because they're relevant to this client meeting part of the discussion.
Uh-huh.
What experience do you have building accessible ADUs, different parts of the house, hallways, entries, kitchens, bathrooms? And then also, do you often or create attached ADUs? And I'm interpreting it like, hey, you either attach it to the house or do a porch or a breezeway or a deck.
Yeah.
And those questions get answered at that client meeting. So maybe you could answer those too.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. So that's where it's so nice to have conversations with folks and get an idea of what they're looking for. Accessible, I would say maybe at least half of our ADUs have some accessibility um, design implications involved. So whether we're planning for the future, whether we're wanting to go fully ADA rule book down the line, if that's what the client wants, we can have those conversations with you and figure out how you're trying to um, why you need that accessibility and what can we do to make sure that you have that. So something like a zero threshold entryway from a garage, so you don't have to have the step up into the house. We do that one quite a bit. Yeah, so we'll kind of pull out what your needs are and then figure it out that way. And then as far as attaching, yes, we certainly do attach. Could think of a few right off the top of my head that we've attached in the last year or two. So again, we'll kind of want to peel back why you want to do that and what your implications are. Typically, to attach is not any kind of cost savings. It's hard to say whether it's going to cost more or less than a detached. Again, site specific. What's the attachment look like? But yes, we can attach directly to the house. We can attach via a breezeway. We can attach via decking. The sky's kind of the limit.
And Cheryl asked, is that client meeting over Zoom or in person?
It typically is over Zoom or a phone call to begin, and then we'll typically meet on site in person with you during the site visit portion of our feasibility study.
Great. And there's
Yeah.
two more questions out there, but we'll answer them a bit later.
Okay, cool. We'll keep going. Yeah. Okay. Site visit. What does the site visit look like? We use tape reels, as you can tell by the photos here. Now we're trying to gather the data. Where are we putting the ADU? What implications? So this was one that I did in South Portland, Maine, and we were trying to figure out. Okay, they knew the size house that they wanted. Where does that actually put us on the property? Just we're making a sketch as we're there. We're taking a look at the existing homes utilities. So how does which we'll get to later on, but how are the utilities servicing the property? Are we able to utilize the existing infrastructure, or do we need to pull in brand new water, brand new sewer, brand new electrical, those types of things? Is there going to need to be an extra driveway? This property was on a corner lot, so are we able to take a driveway off of, do a new curb cut? What does the client want, and then what's also feasible? What does the town allow? So
This next image was one we did, and we gather as much data as we can beforehand, from the computer, from GIS, from Google Maps, Google Street View. This is one we couldn't see this right before we came and said, oh, there's a big retaining wall. That backyard that we see, from Google Earth, that wasn't there. So it's like, okay, we're trying to figure out what is the buildable area. We need to document this. Where is it? How tall is it? So that, hey, as we're back in the office creating that plan, we keep this into consideration, because not only, hey, this is going to impact where you can build the ADU, it may impact utilities, and it may impact site access. And that's all things that we want to consider within the goals of the project.
yeah,
So this is one of those we're highlighting to say, oh, but that site visit is valuable, because you don't always see it all from the computer.
the bird's eye view of Google Maps doesn't quite capture this. That's funny. Um, okay, so utilities, water, sewer, electric, those are the big ones. Sewer and septic, private or public sewer. Um, Depends on where you live and what your existing property has. But we typically have kind of a checklist to run through when we're talking about septic. Typically, we're going to want to make sure that we have the right grade differential. So where is the septic? Where are we hoping to put the ADU? Does that line up? Is that going to be gravity fed, or we're going to have to pump it? Depending on the age of the system, a lot of systems before 96 are going to be questionable whether or not we can connect to them. Tim, you can speak to Title V a little better than I can.
Yeah, definitely. And this will be one where, especially in Massachusetts here, with all the rules that have been changing, both, with the Affordable Homes Act, but there's, Title V at the state, and they've basically published their guidance on how are they treating ADUs. So not only, hey, are we on site figuring this out, but we're going to filter it through those state Title V rules to say, what is the town going to require? What's the
Yeah.
Board of Health? What's the DEP want to see? So the one I went to today, for example, the ADU is going to end up being lower than their leach field. So we basically at this stage, we're not going to pay a septic designer a few $1,000s to design our plan yet, but we're going to plan on having a pump because we're lower, and then having a second tank because the Title V guidance is either two tanks or a dual compartment tank. So at the
Yep.
feasibility stage, we basically just accounted for about $5,000 to $7,000 worth of infrastructure that we know we'll need, that we want to plan for and plan on now.
Yep. Great.
Public
Yeah.
connections have been the same thing, and I'll keep my Massachusetts framework going of, hey, they're now allowed by right. DPWs control water and sewer connections, and every town is a little bit particular about what they want to see. So if we've already built in that town, we'll already know, hey, the DPW does it this way. If we haven't, we'll make some phone calls and try to figure it out. The goal here again is just to capture big risk, and figure out what's there, how do we get there, what might some associated costs be.
Yeah, exactly. Where can the connection be? Each municipality is going to have a different, they can have a different idea of where the connection should be. So we have to play by their rules when they are picky about that kind of a thing. But this is what a septic system looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, or if they're not playing by the rules, we'll call the attorney general. And there's been a lot of success stories in the past year where towns have basically put up a stink through DPWs to require excessive costs and connections.
Yep.
And the attorney general has helped basically reverse those decisions. And we have houses currently under construction where they've benefited from that work. So it's just been great.
Exactly. These are, this is photos from a feasibility study. Septic connection heading out in a basement on the right, and then that is the off gas pipe for a leach field. I feel like we had a good slide somewhere. I'm trying to get to it, but I don't know if it's in this slide. It must not be. I thought we had one that was highlighting where you could connect sewer and that kind of equalize, but
It's later, I think.
okay.
Yeah, you can look at that one. But
Do you want to say anything on this?
oh no, the next one is we'll look at the end as like, hey, you may have records, either in paper or digitally. We'll often also go to the town and say, hey, what records do you have of that septic? Because we want to figure out, hey, we can see everything in the basement and sometimes things in the yard, but what is in the ground? Because that's going to inform our plan.
Yep. Yeah, it's helpful to have, oftentimes when you're closing out a house, it'll kind of come with the paperwork, things like this, like a septic plan or like a survey. Those are helpful things that if you can do a little legwork and find them, I know our team appreciates it, but there are online avenues that we can attempt to try to find what's written down. Some municipalities, I'll speak for up here in Maine, some municipalities don't have a good record keeping system. So we might not know unless you were able to find your physical piece of paper, what is going on there. So, okay, water. Wells. Where's the well? Nobody
Sometimes
knows.
it's obvious, sometimes we don't know. That's another one where we'll see what the infrastructure is in the basement, what you have there, document it. If we can find it in the yard, awesome. Um, there's a couple different ways depending on what's there, how we would connect. Another one where sometimes there's information, maybe on the bottom of that wellhead cap that tells us, hey, how deep is it? The casing, the refill rate, how many gallons per minute. Uh, Oftentimes that information doesn't exist. We can find it. We could go order a test, pump that thing dry, and calculate, what's the refill rate. Other times we analyze the infrastructure that's there and said, hey, we're going to connect, and we'll see how we do. If we have a water pressure issue, we can add, more capacity or a booster pump. Relatively, it's all sort of low hanging fruit. But again, let's figure out where it is so that we can take that into account. Often, if you're on a well, you might also be on a septic system. And especially here in Massachusetts, those Title V rules, we have to be certain distances away from these components. So we want to do our best to find them up front, because that again will inform, hey, where is our buildable area? Where can this go?
Yep. Yep. Great. Public water, a little bit simpler typically. A lot of residential homes are going to have a 5/8 meter servicing their single family. Depending on the municipality, it seems they've actually, up here in Maine at least, they have gotten a little bit more lenient with being able to service an ADU with an existing meter rather than having to do the upgrade. Again, it kind of comes down to DPW of the municipality. But we'll want to take a look at, some older homes have, cast iron pipes servicing doing the water, galvanized pipes, which are not necessarily ideal. So if we see something like that, we can highlight, hey, if you're having water issues, it might be because you have this galvanized pipe. It's probably pretty corroded on the inside. If you wanted to replace your water line to the primary house to then be able to tee off of it, here's a price point for that. If you wanted to try to tee off of what's existing there, and see if that works for you, with enough water pressure, we can go that route. Here's a price point for that. We'll kind of talk through what different circumstances can happen depending on what your house and property are throwing at us.
This was one we did, and often all those utilities are in the basement. I think is this one you did, Jeff?
No, this is not one of
Yeah.
mine. I think
Okay.
this is
a
yeah,
mass one. So
yeah,
it was like, hey, let's go into your basement and find the water, the sewer, septic, and the electric panel. Oh, you have a music studio down here. Great. When we're then going back in the office to analyze what's the best way to route these utilities, obviously we got to take this into consideration. We're not going to run a water line, through the music studio. So part
yeah,
of what we'll document down there is, where are these utilities? What's the level of finish of the basement? Because that will inform the strategy, for connection.
yeah, yeah, exactly. If you have a finished basement, we'll just avoid going down there, and it just means it's just part of the equation of figuring out what the best utility connection is.
DPWs I hand waved this earlier, and I think the example slide next was one of the ones we worked on in Concord a while back.
There you go. Yeah.
They were very clear on what they wanted to see. I think it's actually the next slide. Our ADU, connection. They basically wanted us. There it is. Wait, go one more here. I think. Oh no, let's go back. Which one was it? Go back one. It was pool houses, and then they had, so attic or basement ADU you can share within the house. And then if we go to the next one, they
Yeah.
basically were saying, hey, now that we're detached, they wanted to see us have these different connections.
Yeah.
So some towns like Concord publish this guide. It's very straightforward and clear what we have to do. Um, ADUs again are so new. Not every town, not every DPW is up to speed, and it's a little more ad hoc, or it's at least sort of this first wave. Like as projects are getting approved, DPWs are changing their standards. Um, we've experienced this firsthand where, hey, the first one we built in town, we did it one way, but now they want to see it a different way after more have gone through.
Yep.
Um, the important thing here is we figure out what is the strategy, and then what are the cost implications are going to be. In Concord here, they have a rule that says, hey, if that water line is more than 50 years old, regardless of what you're doing for this project, you have to upgrade it. You have to dig it up to the street, new line. We know, hey, most of these houses in Concord are more than 50 years old. So a water line replacement just gets priced in at the feasibility level. Say, hey, we got a plan on probably another $10,000 at work to dig up, replace the water line, and move the water meter because we're going to have to at the next stage. And that just helps us inform what the strategy and what the cost will be.
Yeah, and to be clear with the feasibility study, we're giving estimates. They're educated estimates. We've done these things in the past, but we'll put a number like 10,000 in there because the last one we did was right in that ballpark, or the last few of them were right in that ballpark. Maybe one was 9,000, maybe one was 11,000. It depends on the site and the trenching and those types of things. So we'll put in estimates, but they're going to be pretty educated, dialed in estimates. So through the next phase of our process, the design phase, we will take that estimate and actually really be able to price it down and out and make sure that it's give it a finer lens to look through.
And that's a
One thing
really
I
good
want,
point, Jeff, too,
yeah,
because there's also towns we haven't built in, and we're super transparent about that. It's like, hey,
yeah.
we've done this. We've done a lot of it, but not in your town. There is actually a question in the audience is, hey, have we built in Norwood, Mass? The answer is no, we haven't. We've built around in towns around Norwood. But if you're thinking of building in Norwood, we'd have to figure out, hey, how does the DPW in Norwood want to see these connections and what are the cost implications?
Yep.
Um,
Great.
great.
Okay, we'll keep going. I had a couple more things to say, but we'll keep it going. I want to get to that live feasibility study. All right. So generally for electric, we'd like to do a 200 amp service for an ADU, and so we do separate services. So the primary house would have its own service as it already has, and then we would do typically a new 200 amp meter and service for the ADU. We like to build all electric, not to say that you can't have a wood stove or something like that if you'd like to have that, but our typical spec is going to be an all electric home. There are, um, uh, you know, things that break the rule here, but in general, that's typically what I see on our projects. Um, and then there's all different types of electrical things to take to factor in here. So the meter is here on the left. This one, they didn't have it mounted on their primary house. Often it is mounted on the primary house. If you're going underground, sometimes there's transformers. If you have a neighborhood, I live in a neighborhood actually that has like underground power on at least one of the streets. And so you'll see these transformers, you'll even hear them humming around. We'll want to make sure that what we're proposing, proposing can actually keep utilizing this existing infrastructure and what kind of upgrades might be needed will be highlighted in your feasibility study.
This is one I did. We were trying to figure out, hey, what's the best way to get power? On the left, it was, well, that's the closest pole, and we're over 120 feet away. So we're either going, we're going to have to figure out, are we going to need another pole? Do we want to go overhead? Do we want to go underground? And then in this case, hey, if we go underground, we're going to end up cutting up part of your driveway, impacting your planting beds, and potentially the fence. So all sort of downstream impacts that we wanted to highlight now to set really good expectations and to plan for it in the budget. That's a really long trench. That's a lot of pipe. Or, hey, we got to pay to put a new pole here. The other one
Yeah.
here on the right is, the poles are both far away. We would be looking to do what's called a mid-span connection and connect to the middle of that span. The the key there is head heights, and all of our lines are set to be a certain distance above the road, so cars and trucks and even the crane that drives down the road to get to our job sites can make it. So we need to verify with the power company, with their field engineer, that, hey, we could connect to that midspan and go to our new roof peak, and that everything will be kosher.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll, at the feasibility study phase, we'll highlight, hey, here's your circumstance, here's what we think is the best solution moving forward. And then, um, you know, if you become a customer further than just the feasibility study phase, then we'll actually get the DPW, get the electrical company out there and verify the plan that we think is the best path forward. So,
And
um,
that's a good point, Jeff, because it's the power company is a black hole. It's a bit hard to get a hold of them. So we're using basically our institutional knowledge of options um, at this preliminary stage to make sure that, again, we've de-risked, we have a way to get to power, and we know the implications.
yeah. Um, okay, we got I think a few photos lined up here. Tim, I think
And
this might have been one of yours.
yeah, and this is just basically all about site conditions. So we've gone through the three utilities, but we also need to think about what are the goals? One bedroom, two bedroom, aging in place, accessibility. Where's the parking going to be? Where's pathways? Here's an example where, hey, we showed up. I could see some of this from street view, but what are we going to impact? Hey, there's a fence. There's nice landscaping shrubs. We can see that even in winter. Um, and if you go to the next one, Jeff, I think it's one more actually. One more. Let's go again. One more again. Where's their backyard? Keep going. One more. They had a really nice patio in the back. No,
Ah,
never mind.
somewhere in here.
They had a
Yeah,
nice patio. So we had to say, hey, we're going to mess up your patio, right? This is, either the utility trenching or foundation. Um, so that was,
yeah,
hey, let's think about the backyard, and spilled the beans in all these next slides. But
yeah.
uh,
It's all right.
yeah, this was basically, hey, again, we got to get back here and clear some trees. There's going to be a fence to take down. Do you want it replaced or not? I know you have a client recently, Jeff, where they have two young dogs. So fence management was really important.
Oh
How is
yes,
that going to impact their life during construction?
yes,
Um, so all things
yep,
we're trying to take into consideration. And maybe we can just rip through the next couple here. Uh,
yeah,
this was that same lot from the driveway. We're thinking about, hey, where's the crane going to go? Where's the modular box is going to go for set day? This was perfect. Showed up, said, great, you have plenty of area. We have space to stage. We have a 30 by 30 area to set up a crane. Awesome. We're going to be able to get to your spot. And then
yep.
also, consider, utilities and all the other pieces.
Crane can pick the ADU up right over the house. It's pretty cool. Always a spectacle. Always fun to see. Uh,
And then this was, the front yard to say, hey, you have a nice yard. It's a big yard. We're going to try to keep our cone of destruction all to the left side and try not to impact as little of the yard as we can.
yeah,
Because even though, again, small house, it is somewhat of a destructive process. It all gets cleaned up and looks great at the end, but we're trying to look holistically at the whole
yeah.
thing.
Construction is what it is. The
We
rock
already
wall
looked at
again.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
looked at this one before. It's like, hey, this is a little bit of a curveball. They wanted to build in the backyard. We presented an alternative. It's going to get a little too complicated to build on top of or near the retaining wall. But this was a good outcome from this to say, hey, we identify this. Let's pivot. We have alternatives and go from there.
all right. This was one that I added in here. This is just looking at construction access. So things to highlight here. They have this large tree, and they have that where we're trying to build is on the right side of the lot. It's in the corner lot here. So they have overhead power coming down their side of the road. So that means that for the crane day operations that we wouldn't be able to set up and go up and over the lines. The power company, nobody likes to do that. Crane operators don't like to do that. Um, they have it's hard to tell, but there is a fire hydrant on their property. So there's water going up and down the street. They want to build right close to the street here. So um, we were able to map out what their setbacks are. We were able to get a good idea. Is there a buildable footprint here? There is. Um, so that's what that
Neat.
photo was. And then this was one I did this summer in Maine, and they just lived down a private driveway off of a nice road, and just thinking through what kind of construction access might look like. So, are there going to be any trees that need limbs maybe removed for construction purposes? So there was a couple limbs. Do we need to take down any trees, or can we navigate this kind of winding driveway with our equipment? I think we highlighted that one tree might need to be removed, and then there was a couple of trees that needed to be limbed. So added cost to the feasibility study for those two things. All right, the deliverables. So our feasibility studies, we provide a site sketch. This was one where they wanted to have, there was an idea that the client had where he wanted to put the ADU, and then we saw an opportunity where it might also make sense for him to place the ADU. He wanted to do just a single bedroom, simple concept, and so it was a smaller ADU. You can see this existing house was 576 square feet. It was a small house, so all of these things are actually rather small and compact. Slot was pretty small. But there was a couple areas where we could have put the ADU, and so we wanted to highlight. Here's a couple options. Here's the utility connections that we're proposing. So he had a finished basement in here, which is why that sewer connection so that finished basement, he finished it. It wasn't noted by the town, so that's why it's at 576. But all that to say, we didn't want to connect the sewer into his nice finished basement area that he had. So we would connect in the yard. And then we had overhead power going to the primary house. We could simply do a nice underground connection. So we could just upgrade the existing line that services his house. And
Oh,
then just
comes right
run
over.
underground. Yeah.
Oh, neat.
Yep. And then water we were gonna tie right again to avoid that finished basement. We were gonna go directly to the street. Was what we were proposing. I forget exactly why we came to that conclusion. This was a couple years ago, but that's what we decided.
But I can imagine, hey, the client required location, much longer run, and
Yes.
hey, cost savings, logistic savings. You
Yep.
highlighted that for him. Is that?
Yeah, that was that. You're refreshing my memory here, Tim. That's exactly what we had. So you can see there's property lines denoted by this dotted line, and then there's a setback line. So in this municipality, he had a 20-foot front setback, he had an 8-foot side setback, and so we were able to kind of, have two options that he could put this in here. So um,
Great.
great.
We have one more sketch here. This one was another twofer where, hey, there was two locations. The clients were thinking, hey, we're going to do it way far in the back. And the feasibility is a great tool to highlight. It's going to be freaking expensive
Yeah.
way in the back.
Yeah.
So let's look at maybe an alternative. How do we connect? And then look at the cost differential there to say, hey, crane staging is easier. Utilities are easier. We're going to connect to the system that's there. The power's at the street. Going all the way back is going to be X, Y, and Z more expensive.
Yeah.
Jeff, there's a great question here. I have a
Great.
hill in the backyard. Have you done an ADU on a hill before?
Yes, we have. Absolutely. So there's going to be a few things to consider with that. Foundation comes to mind. what is underground there. Is it a hill of rock? Uh, is there anything buried under there? There's some simple things like that. But short answer is, yeah, we can. We're gonna need to think about access. So you might have a staircase going up to it. You might have, just there's a couple things that we'll need to talk through. But short answer is yes, and we do it often. We if we can. I was saying to Tim, I don't know if we were online yet, but the feasibility study I did today, they want to do a walkout basement. They were on a hill, so
Great. Um,
great.
there's a couple more questions.
Okay,
I don't want to fully derail us. Maybe we'll get to the report and then we'll answer them. So thank you
okay,
for your patience on the questions. We'll get to them.
yeah. We'll rip through these here. This one looks like it has some wetland overlay. Um, that
Great.
was going to need to be factored in.
Yes. Yep. And this was the wetland, both from a building setback, but basically also here, septic wise.
Yeah,
So there's an area to say, hey, this is here, but we're going to also, you have a septic. We're going to need to figure out what works for the ADU. We also had, highlighting some of those setbacks from those wetlands at an early stage. We haven't hired the wetland scientists, paid them $600 or $700, the surveyor, et cetera. But what do we know based on the GIS, based on we're there? And this one was really tricky. So we had to really figure out how to make this one work.
yeah.
The
Okay,
report,
report itself.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'll take a first crack, I guess, Jeff. This has seen many iterations. So like the person who came back to me from 2 years ago, I was like, can't believe the report used to look like this.
Yeah.
We've really dialed it in. The goal is basically to say, hey, what is all there? What did we find? And what are we propose? And it'll basically be the key three on utilities. It will also be those site impacts. But it also gets filtered basically through, construction and engineering, through the design team. And all that boils down at the end here to the budget. So you mentioned earlier, Jeff, hey, there's a galvanized water line. We'd highlight and say, hey, you don't have to replace it, but let's put a pin in that for later. And we're basically going to come and say, hey, what are all these costs that we see on your land? All these additional costs. Let me zoom in here. I forget whose this was.
Yeah, I can't remember.
This was similar to maybe what you did today, Jeff. They had a full
Yeah,
basement. So, hey, whether it's you want the basement or it's a walkout territory where we have to do a lot of foundation work, it's expensive, but hey, we've accounted for it. There's a lot more digging that's associated with that. They also had a septic and a long electrical line, and a new well. Wow,
yeah.
we put in a
The
doozy.
triple. Yeah, that's a doozy.
But hey, this helps someone get ahead of the reality on their site with those conditions. It looks like we also basically added in finish work, code minimum finishes in that basement. And then also understanding, hey, the design and engineering up front will cost a little bit more, and the on-site construction management with all new utilities, with complicated site work and foundation will be a little more.
Yeah,
But hey,
yeah,
let's figure out where you are. The budget, it's a little hard to read here. Looked like they were 250 to 300. And it's say, hey, we came in at 380. There's going to be some variation in finishes.
yeah,
We may be able to drive the price down to 350. But hey, we're over the budget. Let's have this conversation. Let's figure out why.
yeah,
Maybe there's some things in the additional cost that we can do our homework on and adjust. Maybe we can also look at the base plan that we were looking at together and adjust that. I had someone yesterday who was really interested in the L line. She loved the shape and our plans. We looked at the feasibility report together and I said, hey, the L line is going to fit. This is how we can do it. But we're going to be like 15 grand over the budget. Are you open to looking at a different shape? We're still going to get 2 bedrooms and 1 bath. You're going to have the kitchen you like to cook. But I think, we can hit your price point if we put our design hat on and pull a couple different levers there.
Yeah.
So that's what everyone's always excited to see the budget at the end of the report.
Yeah.
Our goal is to be very comprehensive, cast a wide net, but just like you said, Jeff, we've done a lot of these, but the goal is to basically identify sort of what some next steps might be for your project. This will be a
Yeah.
good transition to get caught up on some questions
Great.
before we sort of dive into maybe this live lookup.
Cool. Let's do it.
All right. So an anonymous attendee asked a long time ago, so thank you for your patience. They were wondering, how does our company and our process differ from mass tiny homes or other ADU companies? And maybe Jeff, it's like, hey, what is this feasibility? How does that differ? And then I know you mentioned it earlier, you've had folks who take this feasibility and shop it around to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, ideally we are aligned in what it is that we do and what it is that you want to do before we actually book the feasibility study. So that's where having these conversations ahead of time is really helpful. That being said, these feasibility studies are non-binding. So our goal with them is to be very comprehensive. I've gotten a lot of feedback from other people in the industry remarking how awesome our feasibility study is. How comprehensive, how it really lays out in a detail oriented way. Now these are construction people, so they're like, "Wow, your level of detail is amazing." But the idea is that is we're going to highlight things to consider. We're going to present solutions and help value engineer, help figure out ways that we can help hit your budget if we're over it, or the fun ones. I had a design kickoff today where our feasibility study came in under their budget. They already had gotten approved for a HELOC that was higher than where the high end of our feasibility study came in. So we got to do the fun thing today and say, we don't have to max out your budget, but if you wanted that screen porch, if you wanted that vaulted ceiling, here's what those cost implications are, and we can go ahead and price those in. And you can really get something that's maybe higher, more of what they wanted than what they thought that they would be able to afford. So that's not always the case, but that is fun when that does happen.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
There's another question. I'm going to reframe it slightly because
Okay.
it relates to the feasibility. And the question is, have you dealt with putting ADUs on properties where the existing home is, quote, a grandfathered two family? And maybe you can just sort of speak to in that feasibility assessment, but honestly, also in the pre-site call that folks can
Yep.
do with our small home coordinators. How do we find that and highlight it?
Yeah, exactly. So it depends on that term, but we'll see what is allowed by the municipality. So like what are the current bylaws? What's the current zoning implications? And so we'll find that not only through the GIS system, but then also through each town's bylaws that they post online. So we can kind of help figure out, is this feasible with a grandfathered in lot? We'll need to abide. We can't make the lot more non-conforming. So if your lot is non-conforming, which that sounds like maybe what you're getting at here, we to add something to the property, typically the town's going to want to make sure that you're not making it more non-conforming, which means that we have to abide by all of the zoning regulations. Typically setbacks are the biggest thing involved with that. There are different municipalities that have different views of can an ADU be placed on a two-family home. So I'm not sure if that's the angle that you're coming at. So we'll be able to, again, find out that information.
Yeah, this will be a great one is reach out and we'll have the info account email. We can do some digging for you to see what's there.
Yeah.
Great. There's another question. I'll answer it quickly. Do you ever adjust to have 10-foot ceilings instead of 8-foot? We just had on that slide there, Jeff, with the report where we talk about additional items. And this is one where folks often ask, hey, are there other options besides an 8-foot ceiling? The short answer to this question is no, we don't do a 10-foot ceiling, but there are ways we can do a cathedral ceiling, which maybe gets us up to 9'6" on one side and 8 foot on the other. Some folks also go up to a full vault. There's price implications for both, but at the feasibility stage, we can put in a placeholder and talk about that so we can, again, look holistically if that fits your goals and the budget.
Yeah.
A
Yep.
very
Well said.
popular question, Jeff, that we haven't answered yet is how much does a feasibility study cost?
Great question. Our feasibility study is a $600 service. It includes a site visit where we'll come out and we'll actually take the to do the site evaluation, and then it also comes with I forget how long the report is now, 10 to 12 page report. Um, and then not only do we just give it to you, but we schedule a presentation. So we'll schedule time over Zoom, typically, sometimes in person if you're in the same municipality, but typically it's virtual. And we'll present the findings and be able to have a time where we can answer any questions you have. I feel like we had um, a slide that kind of covered that. Maybe we don't.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but yeah, well, so and then it's yours to keep. And then, like Tim was saying before, it's you if you wanted to hold it up against somebody else's quote, apples to apples. I've got a client right now, in Portland actually, who she's very excited to go forward. She really wants to go forward with us, but she said her dad told her that she should always get a second opinion, and so she's getting a second contract. And I respect that. That's great. I'm curious to see what it is. I'd be curious to know what level of detail the somebody else was putting forth.
Great. And I think that I line this one up here because it's like, hey, how does our process work? And how do you get started? And it really is that opening up that conversation, reaching out to us. We'll dive in there and do some homework. We're going to do it live here in a minute. It'll be extracurricular. Can you stay an extra 10 minutes or so, Jeff?
I can, yeah.
You have a hard cutoff. Okay. So we can do some live lookup and we'll show you sort of how we do that homework. But then it's, our small home coordinator, if we go to the next slide, will basically ask you some questions and say, hey, what are your goals? I think it's the next one here.
Yeah.
What are you trying to do with this project? Where are you in the process? You mentioned, Jeff, hey, someone earlier had already gone and gotten a survey done. There was someone recently who had already gone and got their septic plan done. Great. Some of those things have already been boxes have been checked. There's a question out there tonight. Hey, if the infrastructure is already done, do you just drop the ADU? This is all important stuff that we're going to talk about early. Because again, we're going to look at everything. So if you've already done some stuff, awesome. We also want to understand, what are you envisioning on your lot? We'll see what we can from the computer. Who is it for? A big one these days is budget. What is the target? Jeff, maybe you could illuminate a little bit more on the folks who you just kicked off, who had gone and gotten the HELOC, who had done a feasibility. How did they approach sort of budget and having a target either before the feasibility or after?
Yeah, they're great. They had started conversations with at least one other contractor, and so they had started kicking the tires of building on mom's lot here in Maine, and so they came to me. They had all by the time they reached backyard ADUs, they had already decided they had gone through some motions with somebody else of saying, okay, what's a realistic budget for something, and then they didn't decide to go forward with them. The other contractor was not as responsive as the client was hoping they would be. But she had already gone through the motions, talked with the HELOC. It's a really close knit family. It's a mother, daughter, and granddaughter situation. So they're all just very close, and they want to all live together on the same lot. So mother and granddaughter are moving to grandma's house. So yeah, so they had already done that. They knew generally it's a small lot. They knew kind of where they wanted to put it. When I went out and did the feasibility study, I was like, this is a slam dunk. This is exactly where we should put it. They knew that they wanted it to be permitted as an ADU rather than a second single family because they actually had their lot had it was technically two lots that was merged together. But they didn't want to go through the motions. They knew that they wanted to go forward with an ADU. So basically we were able to align. That's what I'm trying to get at. We were aligned in what it is that they were looking for and what it is that we're offering, um, which was a nice thing. Yeah, we were able to kick off their design today. I'm excited to see what we end up building.
Great. But so these would all be things, hey, think about ahead of time, but also reach out to us and we're going to talk about, because hey, $600 is still a chunk of change. We're going to put a lot of work into that, but we also want to say, hey, you've thought about it. You've done your homework so that as we link up, we're aligned. Everyone's at a different stage in the process. There's no sort of bad time to start figuring it out and diving in. But these are questions that we'll ask you. So even if the answer is I don't know or I'm not sure yet, take a minute to look at these, and maybe write them down and talk with your family or write down some ideas you have, because this is all part of the process to make sure it's successful down the road. And Jeff, what's the next slide here? I want to make sure we have time to maybe look live. Oh yeah, follow-up meeting. So that initial reach out, you can reach out to the info account or give us a call. Sam and Andrew are on the phones and email all the time, and they do what we're about to jump in. So, Jeff, I think we're going to clear the question deck in 60
Okay,
seconds,
let's
and
do it.
then we'll put a feeler out there. If anyone has an address that they'd like us to look up live and they're comfortable with, go ahead and put that in the Q&A. So Jeff, Kathy has a question. She says, the overhead power lines are on our side of the street. Can your cranes work under them? It's quick,
Yeah,
30-second answer.
yeah, absolutely. Ideally, we would pull the crane in underneath them and set them up on your property. The crane operator does not want to set up in the street and go up over your power lines. There are circumstances where, depending on what kind of voltage is running down those power lines, where we could drop power. So often we'll drop power to the primary house or something similar for the set day, where that line that was in the way is no longer in the way, and then it gets reattached at the end of the day. We'll have to come out and take a look, or get more context.
Great. There's another question from Derek, and he's asking, any difference in the permitting for prefabricated versus stick built?
Mm. I don't think that there is. Tim, does that ring a bell for you?
What we'll do, so we're building offsite modularly. Everything that's built in that factory gets inspected, stamped, and approved in whichever state it's going to. Hey, I'm
Yeah.
building in Maine, but we built this in Pennsylvania. It gets stamped to meet all the requirements in Maine. And then everything that's done in the factory, framing, insulation, electrical, rough plumbing, everything that's done in the factory, again, gets inspected. So our inspection process for a modular is there's an inspection of the foundation, the structural elements before we pour concrete. When we set the house on the foundation, there is an inspection for those connections, both, hey, you've secured the house correctly to the foundation, as well as structurally done the roof correctly. But then we're right on just to the final inspection. We'll have the electrical, plumbing, and final inspections, versus a stick-built process where along the way you have, hey, I have a framing inspection, a wiring inspection, an insulation inspection, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So everything still gets inspected and meets all the applicable codes, both in the state and locally. But because we've done this big chunk of work offsite, our basic checklist of on-site inspections is much lower. That helps us stay in our window to say, hey, we're trying to finish this house in 8 to 10, sometimes 12 weeks on site when we set. All right, Jeff, there are a couple addresses here.
All right.
So let me pull one up. Cheryl, you're the lucky winner. Cheryl, you're in Beverly.
All right.
I am picking Beverly because we have built there. So hopefully we can provide a little more color commentary. Kathy, Len, Donna, and the anonymous attendee, thank you for also putting your addresses in. But let's go live here, Jeff. I'll share my screen. So, all right. And again, we'll probably stay on until 6:15. I know folks have to go. This is recorded, and we'll send you the recording. So great. All right. So we're in Beverly. I'm going to start with the town GIS. So let me copy your address, Cheryl. We're going to go to the GIS. While that loads, I am also going to go to the zoning bylaw. Beverly, of course, has had to come into compliance with the state rules. The one that we built there was before the Affordable Homes Act. So I'm excited to go in and double check.
Cool.
Let's go here first. So exit. Every town may have a different provider here. This one is Map Geo. But I'm going to go find the search bar and I will put your address in here. You can see my screen, right, Jeff?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So some of these are a little finicky as I'm searching. Great. All right. So we found the property. It's highlighted here. I'm going to click on it too, because that's going to bring up some additional resources we have here and information. We want to come in here and look. Hey, what are some of these things? Someone asked earlier, hey, if I have a hill, can I do it? Let's go see if we can get some layers. So in Map Geo, I'm going to click themes and let's come see what kind of data they have. Topography. Great. All right. So now we can see these are 2-foot contours. So we can get a sense that, hey, there is a bit of a hill sloping up in the backyard. Things seem relatively flat around the driveway and house area. In Massachusetts, let's see if we have, DEP wetlands. Do they have any wetlands? All right, nothing came up. That's good. Zoning, I could click on here. Sometimes this is helpful. Oh, in this case, this is very helpful. Yeah, so you're in 2 different zoning districts. We're going to have to look up the rules in both districts. Oftentimes, the town is going to apply the one that's more strict. The annoying thing about these layers is we have to zoom out to figure out what's what. So you're in both the R15 and the R45. Will you help me remember those, Jeff?
Yep, sure can.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to turn zoning off because it's too bright. While we're here, let's see what most recent photos they have. 2021. Let's go look. Great. So got some forests, some not. Let's go check Google. Let's go see what we can see on Google. They might have a little bit better of a view. Looking at this layer, we can see the property line that is also in the GIS, but I really want this for the satellite. And then we'll check here too. Imagery 2026. All right. So a recent photo, I guess, from the fall here in New England with looking at the trees. So, there's a lot of woods and trees back there. Let's see what's on the road. Is that the right side?
Yeah, I think it's the third one.
It is this one. Okay. Jeff, I guess going through our utility stuff, what do you see here at the road?
Yeah. We got overhead connection. We got the electrical main coming down on the other side of Hart Street here. Looks like in terms of placement, I would assume that we're on public connections for water and sewer, but we would obviously check in with the customer. And then it looks like it's a, in terms of site access, you got this extra driveway here that some fencing may need to be, a section might need to be removed for set day logistics, relatively low cost, and then we could replace it. And then I would imagine that where she's wanting to put it would maybe be in this nice big side yard with the trees. Looks like, obviously a tree or 2 or 3 might need to come down, but they all look like normal trees.
Yeah, there's that hill in the backyard. So getting on site to see it. And I did swing around and, we obviously see stormwater infrastructure, but looks like also maybe public sewer. And then
and that's a water. Yeah.
Yeah, water. So the project we did in Beverly before, we connected to the existing water line and the existing sewer line. We'd have to double check that, if the DPW has changed, and I think that was almost 2 years ago now. Um, so, all right. So we've seen Google Maps. We've seen what we could see from the GIS. And then remind me, Jeff, we were which?
It was R45 and R15.
Okay, let's go. Let's go searching here. So we want to find setbacks here. Let's see. Front yards. Pork chop shaped lots. Let's go find this. This is the part where I embarrass myself. Here we go. All right, so we're going to go to R15 first. Let's see what they say. So a by right activity. We know in Massachusetts we can do it, but here it is. Hey, here's an ADU, accessory dwelling unit is allowed, but does not have at, in, or on such property any type of non-conforming situation, non-complying, non-conforming structure. Okay. An existing special permit does not require a variance. We do get asked this a lot. Hey, can I get a variance? And honestly, the answer is probably no. But we're
Yeah.
going to try to figure this out. It
Yeah.
looks like, and again, this bylaw may be old. All these rules are changing. So they have some additional things in here, but let's also, here we go. Here are some requirements. Oh, great. Here
You
are
got ADU right
setbacks.
above that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to say, awesome. You have a 30-foot front setback from the front of your property line, which isn't necessarily the street, 15 feet from the side, 25 from the rear. So let's flip back over. I'll pull it up in Google here. We could probably also measure on the GIS, but we're going to say, hey, we have to measure, where's 30 feet? 30 feet from the front. I'm just going to hand wave halfway through the house. Let's get out of that measurement. And then we know, let's be conservative and measure from the side here. What do we say? 15?
Yeah, I think so.
15. I won't measure the rear. We're far from the rear, but we'd basically say, hey, we're going to have a buildable area in here that's relatively close to our utilities. And, knowing where your driveway is, we're going to have buildable area. Now, hey, what are our risks? Great. We think there's going to be buildable area. We may have to take your fence down. We may have to cut down some trees. I think I pulled up the pricing guide, which we can look at. We would back in and say, all right, pick a standard ADU shape and hand wave budget. We may need, $3,000 worth of tree work, depending on how many trees come down. We'll come assess your utilities, but use the pricing guide as a tool to say, hey, this is my ballpark pre-feasibility. And then if you want to get a feasibility, we can come dial that in and see, hey, are there any other additional costs we might need to consider? Were there any questions in the chat on that, Jeff? I want to make sure I didn't miss anything, or if there are any questions
Let's
on
make
that
sure we
process.
got it. Sorry, I should have been more on top of this. No, I don't see new questions in here.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Well, that would generally be our process, along with having a chat with you about all of those questions. Who is it for? What is your timeline? What is the target budget? What are your goals? If someone said, hey, I'm thinking about having a 3-season porch and a garage, hey, we want to consider, obviously we need space for that, but hey, a garage is going to be X, Y, and Z, and a 3-season porch. And what's your target? Let's have this conversation. Hey, it's for my aging parent. We're going to be thinking about really parking, shorter pathways, things like that. All right. Well, this is a great example
Done.
in Beverly. We could also come up here and click on their rules here. Hey, these are our ADU rules. and come through here. Yeah, so it looks like these were the 2023 rules. We would also want to come in here and just verify in 2025, 2026, did the town update it to meet the Affordable Homes Act? Which of course they
Mhm.
had to do by law, but they could have added other things. Actually, here we go. The Affordable Homes Act says you don't need to own or occupy either units. So Beverly has certainly updated these rules. So I might also come here and go to Beverly, Mass zoning bylaw, because Beverly could have also not updated in this program E-code 360. Let's see what this is here.
It could be like an amendment or something that they.
Yeah, just go to zoning. See if it comes up here. See where it's hiding in the town website. And we are here right at 6:15, so I want to make sure we do they have their rules? Let's go. It could also just be something we do a lot of calling and asking. Let's give the clerk a call and say, hey, what do you have in here? Great design standards. All right.
I have an
So
ADU ordinance on the left there, but I don't. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's not
yeah. So hey,
okay.
this is under review fall of 23. We're gonna want to come in here and make sure that we get the most up-to-date rules, because some towns haven't updated their E-code 360 or honestly
Yeah.
even their website.
What I'll find sometimes is when we do give them a call or an email to a municipality that they'll often a CEO, if they're out of compliance to something, that they'll usually just send it along to me. Oh man, yeah, it's been, they'll have some reason why it's not been updated.
And they'll
Some
have a
towns,
draft out there which they can send. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah. Well, Jeff, thank you for spending the time to be here tonight, especially after being out in the field today for a feasibility study. Are there any other questions in the chat that folks have tonight before we sign off?
We got a lot of thank yous. No, I think we're looking good. I think we answered them. This was great.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We love what we do and we love being able to help people, and thinking about a feasibility and even all the stuff you think about beforehand is really exciting. So yeah, thanks for coming tonight and spending your evening with us.
Thanks, Tim.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.